Hello everybody, how's it going today? Glowplasma231 here, back again today to not talk about Oshi no Ko, as I titled the video Oshi no Ko, and I'm sorry to lie to you, but today we aren't actually talking about the Oshi no Ko manga. Today instead we are talking about the Oshi no Peak manga, because today we're talking about chapter number 160 of the series. This chapter is titled I. Well, it's not like I as in like the main driving plot force character of this series, but more as like the thing that you see out of in your head that like has rods and cones and you can sometimes go blind in, and yeah, a very important part of our everyday life. The way I'm looking around the world around me and able to read Oshi no Ko is with my eye, and that is what this chapter title is called. But as I say, this was an amazing chapter of Oshi no Ko. There's nothing I can really say for or against it right now. We sort of need to like get through it to actually talk about it, and I can give all my final thoughts to you guys so you guys get to know what I think about this chapter of Oshi no Ko. But from the get-go, just know that this chapter was pure and total gas. This chapter was absolutely amazing. So this isn't Oshi no Ko anymore. It is simply just Oshi no Peak. Now, a little bit of an interesting detail I want to talk about before we get on to the chapter itself is, of course, this chapter is number 160, titled I. And as if you guys have been probably watching this channel for a little while, probably within the past year of these videos being published on the channel here, I have been really diving deep into this series and diving deep into the weird idiosyncrasies that we see with where the chapter title is placed in the chapter. So most times in these chapters, the chapter title is placed in this little star icon on the first page or second page sometimes, but normally on the top of the first page. And sometimes we have a situation where the chapter title is not in one of these bubbles or containers or one of these star-shaped objects, as I'm going to call it here. And sometimes it's just randomly just like laid out in the chapter in like a straight line. And sometimes it's just put other places. There's a lot of different sort of things that go on here into how these chapter titles are shown differently, but today we have a sort of different way of looking at it, is because today we're in a white star. Normally, if I'm not mistaken, the star is black, but today we're in a white star. I should have thought about this before. I'm going to quickly duplicate the chapter, and like I'm pretty sure last chapter had it, so let's go to last chapter. Of course, you got to get through the content warning, but if it will load, that would be nice. I may need to just cut out a second of the video here, so just bear with me for a second. Alright, I'm back. After a brief little fact check there, I did see that the both previous two chapters, of course, titled Jewel and Resonance, both had the dark star around them instead of a white star like we have this chapter. So it's just those small things that are different, but it's like, alright, I wonder why this star is white in this chapter. And I think we will get to why that is, but at first we need to move into the chapter, and to talk about this chapter we need to talk about what happened last time in Oshi no Ko. Of course, last time we had the whole fallout of, oh no, Ruby has been stabbed, what's going on? Oh wait, no, it's Akane, but Akane has a bulletproof vest. Oh no, Saito is there, and it was Nino the whole time who was the stabber, and there's two other random people there. Some very deep and dark things about suicide and all of that. Suicidal tensions and all of those ideas came in last chapter, and we ended off last chapter with I confronting, of course, Hikaru again for like the second time in like 5 or so chapters, but this time instead of in a place somewhere, they are on the edge of a beach where Aqua has pretty much called Hikaru a nasty liar who has been telling lies for his own sake, and we see Hikaru is just looking very like dazed and weird and all of that. And this chapter sort of starts off in a few weird perspectives as we sort of cut through two different perspectives between this chapter and have sort of two different people telling the same exact story. Of course, as we'll get to, this is Nino's group, who of course consists of Akane, Saito, and then the two other random people who are there. I still think they are detectives or some kind of thing in that sort of realm, since they knew somebody bad such as Nino was going to be showing up to possibly try to do something to Ruby. But the other group we have is also the group of, what's his name? Hikaru and Aqua. I don't know why I forgot those there, right? But we start off this chapter specifically with just ending off how last chapter happened, where Of course, Aqua's like, hey man, you're a liar who tells lies and all that stake for your own stuff. And Hikaru just turns around, dark Starengons in his eyes, and says, hey, what are you talking about, Aqua? Like, what did I do? Like, are you, like, blaming me for stabbing people or pushing them off ledges or something? Like, hey, you should know, I didn't do any of those things. And he says all this to Aqua with, like, a very coy smile on his face, like, yeah, this guy is definitely talking about these terrible things such as stabbings and pushing someone off a cliff, and you should not be looking like that while you say this. That just immediately, like, flips off the, oh yeah, you're crazy filter in my head. But at this point, we sort of cut now over to the other group I was just talking about with Nino, who we see the state of this room has sort of progressed a little bit. We see that Akane is sitting on one couch, then there's a little table on there. Let me rephrase that. Akane is sitting on one couch. On the opposite side, on the other side of a table, is another couch where Nino is sitting on. And then we see Saito is sort of standing at the table between the two of them on the side. And then the older looking guy and the younger looking girl are also there, standing, as we pretty much hear that Nino is telling a little bit of a story to the 4 other members in this room right now. As she's pretty much going through and just saying, like, yeah, Kamaki-san didn't do anything. As I find this really interesting because she says Kamaki-san, and then the didn't do anything is actually in quotation marks, which is a little bit of an interesting detail that Aka Asakasa, of course, the author of this series, put in here. A little interesting. But Nino just continues to say, like, hey, all he did was talk about I, and he wouldn't let us forget about I. He thought that was enough for us to break. She pretty much, like, goes into a bit of backstory details, like saying that both Nino and, oh, I'm sorry, this is like where I said a little bit of that confusing nature of the two characters. At this point, we cut over to Hikaru and Aqua again, as Hikaru is now telling a part of his side of the story, just saying, like, yes, both Nino-kun and Ryosuke-kun approached me first. I don't know why he is giving Nino the kun here, because that is normally reserved for, like, a male of, like, a, not like a friendly sort of nature. Normally you would be, say, like, Nino-chan. Like, yes, it can also be used for, like, people younger than you, but also just, like, a cute girl in general, as they sort of say. So I find it interesting that he uses the Nino-kun, but that's really just, like, inside the Japanese here, and I don't really know if that matters for the larger context of these chapters, right? But we pretty much see a few images of a young Hikaru and younger Nino and Ryosuke as they're sort of all just going around and walking around town. We see them in a karaoke bar somewhere, as we pretty much see Hikaru's like, yeah, I thought of the two of them as friends. They were both nice after all, but I didn't know that they were obsessed with I. And that's why I told them my pathetic heartbreak story while being very vague about all of the details. I also said that I was unsure about whether I should go visit my girlfriend who was about to give birth at a hospital in Miyazaki, but I had no idea what happened there. As, of course, Hikaru's looking like, alright, so he sort of still thought of I as his girlfriend back during that time. I mean, it does make sense that they did have a child together for all sake, but the whole thing of, like, they definitely weren't talking with each other and meeting with each other then, so the whole idea of, like, alright, hospital in Miyazaki, I didn't want to go there, and I was unsure about it, and we see that Ryosuke and Nino actually went by the hospital, as we see this really disturbing panel where we see both Nino and Ryosuke, the two of them, sort of there at the hospital, and we pretty much see the silhouette of Goro, who presumably just got pushed off of the edge of the, of the cliff after the events of the first chapter. A little bit of an interesting detail I want to note here. Oh, my bad, I had to get a little burp out of the way there, but I'm sorry, another one. But a little bit of an interesting detail here is that in this image, Nino's eyes are still that completely black, like, color, like no pupil, no nothing, just completely black. And I find it really interesting that in all of the panels before this, like, we don't actually see Nino's eyes. Like, she always has him closed, or is blinking, or is closing them while singing, and doing all that sort of deal. And whenever we see her eyes open, even in the past, they're just that black and soulless void. super interesting, right? And then, of course, I just love Ryusuke's expression here because he's just like, oh crap, what did I just do? Oh crap. Just very interesting expression he gives there in general. But Hikaru pretty much continues saying, like, and also, the day that I died was also the same. I didn't have the courage to meet I just yet, so I asked him to deliver the bouquet. As we're pretty much getting to that point of, alright, we see that Hikaru, like, wanted to give something to I to, like, commemorate, like, oh, thank you for doing this. But he was like, I don't want to do it myself, so he gave flowers to Ryosuke and told Ryosuke to deliver them. Of course, giving Ryosuke the address that then I got killed at, all yada yada yada, right? And Hikaru's like, I never thought of hurting anyone, because of course we knew that Ryosuke then stabbed and murdered I in that scene right there, right? But as Aqua hears this, he's like, no, Hikaru, that's a lie too, right? And he just says like, hey, to me, it all comes down to the fact that you didn't protect your own daughter. You were aware of Nino's mental condition going into all of this, but you did nothing to prevent it. You tried to kill Ruby, didn't you? And what Aqua is sort of getting at here is that by manipulating all of these other characters so subtly throughout the series, Hikaru did push Ryusuke and Nino to shove Goro off the cliff. He did persuade and subtly manipulate, why did I forget his name all of a sudden? Ryusuke, I don't know why I was like, I just said it and I'm like, huh. What's his name? Huh. And I'm like, oh, yeah, Ryusuke. We see that Hikaru also briefly manipulated Ryosuke to end up killing I, and presumably he did not manipulate Ryosuke into killing himself. That was something else that Nino did based off of the guilt that Ryosuke felt, right? And what Aqua is getting to now is that he has done the same, that Hikaru has done the same thing with Nino in the murder or pseudo-murder of Ruby at this point. As he's just like, yeah, you failed to protect your own daughter by, in this way, messing with Nino and getting to, and pushing her past her feasible limit. Really interesting. And then I need to mention whenever Aqua says this, like whenever he says, you tried to kill Ruby, didn't you? The way he's drawn and the way he is that his dark Starringons have appeared again all of a sudden as they grow into these big, massive, and like evil spikes in his eyes, and it is a stupidly awesome image. But at this point, we just see a slight image of Hikaru's mouth, as we can't really tell if he's forming a smile or if he's forming like a frown. We can't really tell. And then we just get 2 shots of Ruby singing her thing, living her best life, being an idol for becoming a Hachi. And as we flip the page, we see, I think, the most demonic image we have ever seen in Oshi no Ko, as we see an image of Hikaru here. And this is on, I mean, you can't miss it in the chapter. This is on page 8 of the chapter. No, not 8. This is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. No, it is 8. I don't know why I can't count at points. But we see this creepy image of Hikaru. He's shaded very interesting. And we see that his dark Starringons are also like becoming massive and almost growing out of his eyes. And we see his smile is almost formed with shadows around his mouth. It is such an interesting image, getting to this point around that, yeah, this is what he's been doing this whole time. He's been subtle about it, and who knows, he may have also been lying to himself about all of this, but it doesn't matter the fact that this is what Hikaru has been doing this entire time. It is, oh, chef's kiss to Aka Asakasa for writing this, and then a double, triple chef kiss to Mingo Yorki for giving us this image of fear and pain and realization and all of these emotions that Hikaru shows here in this panel on page 8. It is amazing. Like, oh my gosh, I could almost sit here for another 5 minutes and talk about what this image means and recontextualizing this entire series. But alas, we need to sort of move on with the chapter. So at this point, pretty much Aqua just continues on with his sort of whole thing, just saying like, Hikaru, you tortured the hearts of others on purpose and stoked the flames of madness of those who are weak. As we see images of him, we see in the bathroom one day, we see it, there are toothbrushes in sort of a cup, and we see that Ryosuke-kun's around and Hikaru's also there. And we see one of the toothbrushes inside of the cup is eyes toothbrush, which is clearly like labeled. I don't know if that's something that goes on in Japan. Like, whenever I think of like a household of different toothbrushes, they're normally different models or different colors, and I mean, it does look like these two toothbrushes are the same, and we can sort of tell they're white by the profile color we see, but we don't see the other toothbrush, so I don't know if that toothbrush just says Hikaru Kamiki on it, but we know this one does say I on it, so is what it is. And then the other image we see is of Nino. Gosh, Nino is collapsed on the ground, and we see this is the direct aftermath of a scene that we saw last chapter, of course, where Ryosuke committed suicide and killed himself by hanging himself in his and Nino's apartment. And we see just Nino on the ground crying, and we see Ryosuke is hanging from the ceiling. We see Hikaru behind her with a hand on her shoulder trying to console her, and the way we see this panel is that as he's talking to her, we see Nino's like sad and depressed face, and then we see Hikaru's face, which is just covered in a black silhouette with just his mouth in white sort of portraying it. Another amazing visual there. But Aqua just continues, and he says, Hikaru, you continue to bring forth killers and victims for your own convenience. An instigator who won't get his hands dirty. A despicable and selfish liar. You're more hideous than a murderer. And as he says this, Hikaru just says, oh, I see. Well, then you're the same, right, Aqua? You also have those same eyes as me. As, of course, yeah. This is like, it's not just like the whole idea of like, yeah, your father, so like genomes get passed down and DNA and all of that sort of deal. No, this is just the idea of those eyes of a liar. And as we're going to get to, let me just read a chapter so I can sort of talk about all of this at once. Hikaru continues saying like, Aqua, you have the contingency to make people believe you and exude a charisma that could be called star quality. You have the lying eyes that deceive and make people obey you. I did not mean to open up Microsoft Copilot. I meant to click the other arrow. Golly, why did my computer do this sometimes? There we go. And Hikaru just continues saying to Aqua, I wonder how many people you've instigated just like me. How many people have you deceived in order to achieve your goals? As he says, it feels good to know that your talents can impact and other people's lives, doesn't it? As we see a slight image here, of course, of not only the eyes between Aqua and Hikaru, but in this final moment where he just says, it feels good to know that your talents could impact other people's lives, we see images of all of the lives that Aqua has impacted while doing this. We mainly see Kana, Akane, who I think is Melt. I'm not 100% sure, but just like the way the hair looks and everything, I think that's Melt, which is very cool if that's like the other character we focus on. And of course, Saito in this moment. So, of course, probably the two people that he is directly affected the most is, Kana and Akane, his two girlfriends. Not at the same time, that makes Aqua seem like a way more of a douche than he actually is. But also, Melt and Saito does make sense. But before I get to Aqua's rebuttal to what Hikaru says here, this is so interesting as the whole idea of, as we know, the eyes of a liar are the eyes of the Dark Star and God. I think we learned that in what, chapter 240? Or not, I'm sorry, not 200, 140 if I'm not mistaken. I think that was whenever we sort of got that, or may have been 141. I don't quite remember off the top of my noggin right now. But we learned that during the previous scenes with like Ari, Hikaru, and all of that sort of stuff while the filming of the movie was going on. But I love this sort of duality between them because, of course, we know that Aqua is not a good guy. I mean, he does do good things. He's sort of, in a way, like an anti-hero, I guess I would say. I mean, he is a hero story, he is doing good things, but he's also playing by his rules, and the rules here playing by are also the rules that his father Hikaru played by to manipulate all of these people into doing his dark bidding for him, which normally ended up in murder. So, very interesting look here, and I also will like refrain to mention, like I can't not mention this. We see an image of I here on the bottom of what page is this? Let me do my handy math. I think this is page 12, where like you have the lying eyes that deceive and make people obey you, and we just see an image of I with these eyes. So just a little bit of an interesting visual there. I don't think that's saying that I followed this rule, because of course we knew that she was a bit different in that sense than, of course, how Hikaru and Aqua have been acting throughout the series, but nonetheless, very interesting visual. And being that there's a lot of like great visuals in this chapter, I mean, we'll get to one at the very end of the chapter, and then the simple image of like demonic Hikaru. As much as like those are good thumbnail images, like those are also like extremely spoilerly images. So I don't quite know what I'm gonna use for a thumbnail yet, and I think this eye image may be a good one for that. But as all of this happens, Aqua continues after Hikaru is pretty much just broken down Aqua, saying, hey, if you call me having these lying eyes, well, you have them too, boy. Like, don't get this twisted here. But Aqua then just says, like, hey, I mean, it is true that me and you are both beings who have, I'm sorry, what does Aqua say? Yes, it is true that the both of us are ugly beings who manipulate other people's hearts. We deceive them and make them obey us for our own personal sake. But Ruby is different, which is an awesome thing. Aqua is acknowledging the person he is, but what he's saying at the same time is, hey, the other person you're trying to kill right now isn't like the both of us. So while me and you may not have a good fate ahead of us, I know somebody who does. Golf clap, but let's just continue. Aqua just continues saying, like, hey, even now, she's singing of love. A love song that will save those who hear it if they just believe in it. Those eyes aren't meant to deceive people. To those she's never met, to all of those who are lonely right now, to all of those who are currently looking for love, these eyes are the eyes of love of someone who wishes to love others. The eyes that convey love. And Aqua says this, and as I say here, we need to hold up before we move on and talk about all of the images that we get while Aqua breaks all of this down. We see Ruby, who of course is singing on the stage doing this. Not really anything too interesting, of course. She is singing the song of love right now, pretty much. But we see an image of Serena, who, of course, back in the past, we know that I had these light starring gons, or here, as we now get them called, the eyes that convey love, whereas I'm going to call them the eyes of love, like the eyes of liars and the eyes of love, right? It's sort of the duality of the dark starring gon and the light starring gon, as I call them here on this channel. But we see that Serena, of course, was influenced by Ai's song of love to believe it, and it ended up saving her, because, I mean, that's what Aqua says. A love song to save those who hear it. It saved Serena, gave her hope to live and become an idol one day. Of course, she ended up fulfilling that dream through being reincarnated as Ruby, which is not normally how it would have happened, but still, a very interesting way to sort of go through it there, because Serena was influenced by this. The next image we get is really interesting, as Aqua says, like, hey, this is also, the eyes aren't meant to see people, to those she's ever met, to those who are lonely right now. These are eyes of love that convey love, right? And we see an image of a little girl here, presumably, right? The hairstyle on this girl sort of reminds me of Minami's eyes, who of course, or Minami, who is Ruby's friend in school, the pinup model girl, also was a bit prevalent during the Dig Deep arc, but I don't think this is her, and I think this is simply just like another child who is currently being influenced by Ruby's eyes, and by the context of like what we see on screen, it says like, to those who are lonely right now, I presume that this is supposed to like, this girl is currently lonely, and Ruby singing and being an idol, and her eyes of love are giving her more of a reason to go on throughout the day. A great message through and through. Then the Aqua stuff, for those, of course, the people outside my window have to start doing lawn work now. Let me close the window real fast and no one can talk about Hikaru again. Alright, window shut, Hikaru. And then the whole thing of, to those who are looking for love, the eyes of love that convey love, right? And that was a lot of eyes of love, but we pretty much see this same image with Hikaru, like, hey, those are the eyes that convey love and show your wishes onto others. So a lot of really interesting details going on here about what the different eyes of these characters mean throughout the series, right? At this point, we have 2 pages left, and each of these pages go to a different scene. As we see, the first page is currently on the stage of the tour in, I think, what is it? Are they in Tokyo right now? I honestly forget where this final performance, of course, this is the Christmas Day performance where it's going on. As we see, Ruby and Debiko Nahachi Girls have just finished one song, and Ruby's like, alright guys, well, this is my favorite song, as we pretty much see that she stands in the middle of the stage, Kana gets on one side of her, and Mimcho gets on the other side of each other, and Ruby pretty much just screams out loud to the audience, please send your wish to your idol! As we see that's the song title, and she like throws her arms up in the air, like getting ready, like, here we go, this is an amazing song, let's do it. And that is where this page goes. As we flip to the next page, as Aqua is now holding a knife in his hand and has it pointed perfectly towards Hikaru, we see that his eyes are the light Starengons now, or the eyes that convey love, and he just says, hey, Hikaru, I want you to disappear now for the sake of Ruby's future. And that is where we end off this chapter of Oshi no Ko. There's one thing I briefly want to touch on before I just gloat about how amazing this chapter is. We presumably don't know what time of day Ruby got stabbed. It was presumably going to be in the morning or like mid-afternoon whenever this was going to happen, because it was like Christmas Day. I don't remember the exact wording. I may try to pull up that chapter again real fast. But the reason I say this is currently outside, the way we sort of are led to believe is like these two things are happening at the same time. Ruby is doing her ultimate performance, and Aqua is going to try to stab Hikaru at the same time. But behind Aqua, it is nighttime out, and we don't really get a sense of what time of day, or no, we do see a slight time of day it is outside, behind Who's Her Face Ruby in one of these scenes where it looks like it is nighttime out. So I'm just trying to wonder the timeline of this, like, did Nino get apprehended earlier in the day, and, like, what we're seeing now is just, like, what happened a few hours ago, and then Aqua confronted Hikaru, and yada yada yada, or I'm just wondering about the main timeline, because we're sort of led to believe that all three of these events are going on at once, where it doesn't necessarily seem like that is the case, and I'm just a little interested by that sort of right there, but that's not really a big gripe at all. It's more of just like, for somebody who cares a bit too much about this series, there we go. But just going through this chapter again, this was complete and total gas of a chapter. I mean, we have a cliffhanger of, alright, Aqua says, I want you to disappear now for the sake of Ruby's future, and points at him with a literal knife. Like, I'm sure most of us expected something like this, but oh boy, what is going on now? It's just like, I have honestly no prediction where we're going to be next chapter. I take it that yes, we are probably going to cut through scenes of, I'm pretty sure we're probably done with scenes of Nino, because I think we've got most of that whole idea that, like, yes, of course she was subtly manipulated by Hikaru through this time, but I don't know where that is going to end up leading us to in the grand, like, scheme of things. I'm pretty sure that she'll be done. We may see a picture of her being locked up or whatever, but I imagine that'll probably come at the same time after Aqua has either stabbed Hikaru or Hikaru has done something himself. Don't know yet, but next chapter, if I had to guess, will probably be a mix between Ruby, Kana, and Komachi, or Komachi, my bad. It's not Komachi, it's Komachi, singing their song, and also Aqua and Hikaru playing with knives. And to that end, I don't really know what's next for this series, but this was an amazing chapter. We learn about what the light Sharingans mean, the eyes that convey love, along with the dark Sharingans of the eyes of liars that suddenly manipulate people over time, that deceive and make people obey you. Just a lot of awesome and really interesting stuff in this chapter of Oshinoko. I really don't have too much else to say on it. I think that I got through a lot of my thoughts during the chapter itself, so here in the sort of final thoughts section, don't really have too much to note on, but again, an amazing chapter of Oshinoko. Like, I don't know what else to say. A little bit of a sad note on this sort of means is that we have a 2-week break between the next chapter of Oshinoko. Of course, Akakusasa tends to do this a little bit, where it's like, all right, we will get a big chapter out, like a big cliffhanger, and then we'll do a 2-week break. Of course, we got that with like, oh no, Ruby's been stabbed, 2-week break, and now we're like, oh no, Aqua has a knife, 2-week break, and to that end, we sort of have had this a lot of times before, but this time we've just had 2 chapters in between it, but it is whatever it is. I think we can all have a healthy dose of waiting for Oshinoko whenever it comes out on the 25th of September, of course, 11 a.m., so, oh, another burp there, golly, I'm just burping all throughout this episode. So, we got 2 weeks to wait for a chapter, but that's not really any problem there. And with that, I really don't have too much else to say about this chapter. Demon Hikaru looks absolutely amazing, I can't lie at all, and just a lot of the visuals we get in this chapter are really, really good. But yeah, with that, thank you guys so very much for watching this video on Oshinoko. If you did enjoy this, I've got plenty of other Oshinoko videos on the channel. I have been covering this series for over 50 chapters now, I think. Or no, I think I'm one off of 50 chapter, but also like 50 chapters if you include those interlude chapters that we got around this time of last year, but I digress. I've got plenty of other Oshinoko videos on the channel, so if you want to go check those out, check those out. Leave me comments down below in the description telling me what did you think about this Oshinoko chapter. Of course, you know my thoughts that this chapter is awesome, and if you guys want some interesting theories on Oshinoko chapters, there's been some people leaving some interesting theories down there. I'm not going to make a video about them, I don't think, but it's just like some interesting things that people are bringing up, so go check out those if you particularly care. And yeah, if you also enjoyed it, hopefully you'll mind liking and subscribing to the channel. Small little things that just do a lot to help me out. And just on one sort of different personal final note, I just want to say that I got this video out on the release date of this chapter. Like, I'm actually recording this video right now. It's currently 1:14 p.m. in the afternoon, which is just 2 hours after this chapter initially came out. So videos on the channel are hopefully going to be more consistent going forward here, but I can't really promise anything with that, so there's no delay on Oshinoko chapters like there was back in the day, and while I hope to not have that happen more, of course, as you guys do know, I've talked about this plenty on the channel, but I am in college now, so there's going to be points where I have free time and then points where I don't have free time, and right now I had free time, so you guys get Oshinoko the day it came out, which is something I don't think I've done in a long time. I even think, let me go check YouTube Studio, but last week whenever I talked about chapter number 159, Resonances, I think it was called, let me check. Yeah, that came out on September 5th, which the chapter initially came out on September 4th, so yeah, at points I'm not great at Oshinoko, but hey, I'm still getting them out good enough, but I digress. All of that being said, thank you guys again for watching. I talked about all the outro stuff already. I don't think I mentioned if you want to follow and talk with me some more, there's a Discord and Twitter link down there in the description. Go check out those things, and with that, that is everything I want to say about this chapter. I have nothing else to mention besides that Demon Hikaru looked amazing again, and I'll catch you guys next time for chapter number 161 of Oshinoko. Again, this was chapter number 160 of, Oshino Peak, and this chapter was titled I, and yeah, I'll catch you guys next time. Thank you guys so very much for watching, and this will be Glowplasma 231, signing out.